do today. Welcome to Maintaining the Jedi Order. I'm Chris Scott. If you haven't followed me online, pretty much everything is Cyber Assassin. I also run the Red Team channel, or just an open communication IRC channel for anyone wanting to pen test or Red Team information on PhreakNIC called PIHack All the Things, and, kind of inside InfoSec humor. Twitter, find me at cyber_assassin. They don't allow dashes on Twitter, so it had to use an underscore. The basic introduction for me, I'm a consultant in pen test, and I wanted to present and build code based on that model. So everything I did, I just wanted to find a way to improve the methodology you use as a pen tester to make you more effective. So I'm going to lead you into just a quick intro of what this is about, and we begin and kick off the theme of what this entire talk is about.
I was looking to turn the audio up on the projector. No.
We have it plugged over here.
Yeah, your source is HDMI right now for your audio.
Yeah, I thought it was a minute ago. It's fine. You guys, if you can't hear it, that's okay. Maybe someone can. It's just the Star Wars music theme, because the theme is Star Wars, and I'll need to explain why. It was way more interesting when I had the theme music. Promise. So in case you missed the abstract online, that was the abstract in movie theme form. So let's continue on back to same screen, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what the project here is. Every time I come up with some new code that I'm going to write or a project, I theme it. The last one was N4P, and I themed it on the movie Hackers. Some of this code, I'll get the name, I don't want to give it away yet. I themed it off of Star Wars. So for the talk, which is going to go into some of the code that I've released for you guys to use open source always, is themed off Star Wars. So I'm continuing that flow there. So how do we manage our networks as a pen tester, and what do we want to do in a week's time? Because we get some scary scopes put at us. And scoping is not bad. I know as pen testers we're always like, no, everything needs to be unscoped, completely free reign on a network. And that's ideal, but it's very much an APT mindset, and that's a good mindset. It's hard for a lot of companies to quantify how do we fix, remediate what you find without having a defined parameter to look at. It also helps with checkboxing for compliance structures. So think of it as you're really kind of also doing them a service by keeping it within a scope, but consider selling them and talking and communicating with them going open so that there's no scopeless projects. Understanding this is what will really help you work with the sales management and help you with your clients, communicate with the client, because they don't really understand the impact of what they're giving you with classes and scopes, and you do. So you can get really overwhelmed and like, well, how do I service them? Well, that's what we're going to get to and show you, and how do you understand to break that down in the automation code I've written to really help you provide a good service deliverable on that. So dealing with the scope we have right here, that's a pretty insane scope in most cases, but I've seen it happen. So everything that I based on in here is based off of what I've actually seen happen in the real world testing at some point in time. Now, if we look at these 3 Class Bs and 3 Class C networks, we generally have a week time. This is 197,364 IP addresses. As we know, there's 65,535 ports on each system. we're never really going to get through that. Why aren't we going to get through that? Well, a basic Nmap scan will use the top 1,000 ports or 1,000 ports. And what I did is on my gigabit line, I just picked random IP addresses through the web and scanned them and said, well, how long does it take for one system to be checked? The average time came out to be 69 seconds. That's quite a lot. So let's add that up in minutes, hours, and break that into work in days. So if we just try to scan this scope, providing that everything was alive and non-paralyzed, it'd take 411 work days. That's kind of impossible. But you can do it, and let's start finding out how. So let's talk about real world perspective here. So not all those hosts are going to be alive. So let's just be fair about this and say, okay, let's cut this in half. 205 hosts. That sounds about fair in time. Mainly because not all systems are going to take this long, and that's also because they're not going to have many services running, or the latency might be different between the IP addresses within that network. So we're just being fair and saying, let's take a real world perspective and cut that time in half. So it's looking a little bit better. So what time is lost in that? We already talked about we cut the time in half and not all the hosts are live. Generally, we're going to look at only 20% are live on most IP-based spectrums that you get on a network. So let's look at what is the time lost on that. What did we lose? So if we look at the sum of 20% of that particular scope, we lost 230 hours of work time just finding out if any of those systems were live. Completely wasted, nothing we can do about it. So what do you do when you see that hit your desk and that scope hits your desk? You pretty much double facepalm and say, yeah, my life. But it's inevitable. Monday comes, you get there, you start working, and they always come to you and say, we found some other IPs in the CD, and the engineer just got to us, and we need these tested for a report because we have to be compliant. So, hey, guess what? Here's 3 more. Now, I always kind of look at it as I feel like they're the Sith Lords, and I feel like the scene from episode 1 where he said, at last we'll have reveal ourselves to the Jedi. And they'll have the Sith will have the revenge. It's like, oh man, how am I going to do this now? So we now have 393,000 IP addresses to work with. Way too many ports. And I feel like I'm Luke Skywalker. Let's go creep, and it's impossible to handle. So you talk to them, hey man, this is impossible, and this is what you end up getting back. Always inevitable. So you work with what you have. So if we looked at if we keep the time frame that we were going from and looking at, we'll just begin the test. What happens when you get a Wednesday status call? 1 p.m. Found anything? No. Why do you think we haven't found anything? We haven't found anything because, well, too many IP addresses. So what do we do looking at the timelines now? We ask for help. So how do you ask for help? You call a Jedi. In a cute little droid in a holographic picture of your sister, who, to not spoil the story, you end up making out with later. Don't do that. So, anyways, pretending you're a Jedi, now you're looking for help, and we need to think about parallelization. Parallelization is what's going to save us here, and what happens when we start parallelizing and doing discoveries first. Forget scanning. It's something that a lot of young hackers or junior hackers start doing when they start wanting to scan a network. They just open up Nmap and say scan. I can just put the IP addresses in and scan. I can do the same thing in Nessus. But the problem is, let's take Nessus for example. You got about 5.2 seconds of a timeout per IP address. It doesn't parallelize near as well as Nmap can. So your times are almost infinite what it would take to scan this network. It'll never happen. So we can use Nmap and parallelization to try and speed that process up. So once we do that, we'll just say we're going to do a basic port discovery and find out what systems are live to begin working with. At this case, it would take a day and a half, 1.35 work days. It's starting to look like it's doable, like you can actually do something with this. But this is just the beginning. Now you're only feeling like now you're starting to get to a Jedi. So how can we use the Force to actually become more effective and make this a deliverable? Comes some software I've written, Phase Blaster, which is open source. As anything I do and write, it will always be open source and free because that's how I like it to be. I also write on the Pen2 Linux platform, which is based on Gen 2. So if you're using different operating systems, you might run into some bugs if I haven't gotten to it yet, but let me know. If not, you can always feel free to download Pen2 and use that. Or new OS if you're not using it. I think it's a great distro. Now, let's take a look at what are some of the main features that you get using this that can help you out. We can parse our results, do a quick NVT scan, and generate Nessus. Well, what do these do? Well, there's too much raw data when we talk about your Nmap outputs to go through. So we need it sometimes, but if we're just looking for the brass tacks of what we need to attack, and that's what we're really after at this point because we're trying to be effective, we want to run parse. So what it's going to do is it'll give us viewpoints of here's the hosts that I found that are alive, and here are the actual services and only the services that are open so you can look at them. It's a way for you to start narrowing your view from broadness to what I can actually target and only focus on what you can target, because what you can't is just going to overwhelm you and make you less effective on your projects. So we'll just focus in more. And let's see about how that actually works in a workflow. So one of the other features is -B to C. It'll break all, you can put in your beginning of your class B network, it'll break it all up into an IP folder or file as class Cs. That way, a lot of clients will come back to you and be like, hey, look, we can't just touch these, you can't touch these IP addresses or this class. It's very time consuming to break those up individually. So we do it for us automatically, and then we can add them into like an exclude file, and it will be removed from any of the scanning that's done, as well as when you ask it to run like the Nessus outputs, it will only generate the IPs based from the scope that are not in the exclude file. So you don't have to worry about running over anything which shouldn't be while running Nessus. -D here option just does a host response, but we can do -DF, which would just do a host response to find out what's alive out there, and then begin scanning. As soon as we do what's alive, we can also run -S Nessus, which does the output, which I talked about, and then we can import it into Nessus. So I like to run multiple boxes, and we'll start to talk about why, and why we want to run these type of workflows and break things out. Because we're going to be targeting specific services and items of interest because we want to be effective. That's what it's about. So offload anything, offload all the things. So immediately, as soon as I get a host discovery done, I can't wait for scans to happen. Like, you can't wait for Nmap to finish before you go to work. You're going to burn all of your time on the engagement because it can take 1 to 2 days that you're going to be doing that scan. So start offloading. I use usually 2 computers, another VM, and some Raspberry Pis. How can that help you out? Well, let's check it out. So we offloaded Nessus. Offload any tasks with responder or primary Windows segmentation is identified. So anywhere that I find a network that is running mostly the Windows or the client user space for Windows, we want to start trying to capture credentials, because the more we can operate within the natural environment of the network, the less detected we can become, and the easier it is to start elevating privileges instead of always being behind the curtain. So how can we do this with the scope? Start talking to the client, really, because they're going to give you an overwhelming scope. As you know, you're dealing with the management. The engineer is just going to give them the scope and say, hey, this is what I need done. Ask them, hey, where does your client environment live? Where does your server environment really live? Get to what is the most important and vital points within that IP scope. Then you can focus on building those first within a Phase Blaster. So run those first. Get yourself a discovery going, drop those in Nessus, and then run an nmap on those, and you can go back again with the remaining ones after a set finishes, take the less vital IPs and start begin scanning on those. Because it is important for them to feel like you touched everything, and you're going to want to get it in a position that you did touch something around all the network, but you'll never be able to take a deep dive in everything. Because, we're only not scanning 65,000 ports. You're always going to miss things. But we also need to be effective, and that means delivering them something valuable that they can use to feel like they've gone back and improve the security of their network. It's not a one-stop fix shop. You're going to continually help them improve their environment, and that's what we're going to look at. So when I find that Windows environment, what do? I drop a Raspberry Pi on that I built. And that's going to be looking for, just in the Windows network, I'll tell you what it does. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're looking for these services mainly, what are like primary services. Nagios, HTTP, JBoss, IS systems, VNC, SSH, unsecure protocols, FTP, Telnet. That's what we're going to be looking like in our parse output. Things of huge interest that might have exploits in ExploitDB or Metasploit. All the meanwhile, Nessus is running, a Raspberry Pi is running. And we're also going to start looking at web port applications. So we've identified high target values within common ports that web applications run on and services. Don't worry about the rest. Let Nessus run in the background, check it for any critical things that also might be directly exploitable to gain easy access. But don't spend your time worrying about the little one things, the mediums, the lows, stuff out there like that. It's more of a validation process for you to understand where might I go, where do I find an environment section that might have been slightly neglected in their update intervals. So these are the key points that you're really looking for to help you target out. On each of these things, what are they doing? In the cracking section, I talk about Raspberry Pi. We're capturing hashes over ATLMR net BIOS being cracked. Services, again, identifying exploitable ones. What can I do to scan these ports quickly? Because Nmap's already running. We're going to need to run another system that these ports aren't used on. Mass scan is a really good way, if you know the ports you're looking for, just to blast out faster than what Nmap would, because it's going to be looking for all the ports. Quick way to find out if there's any web services running. And then you can independently run something like Eyewitness on them and then start feeding them into burp of any type of important applications that you found. Now, I do this on the side as on my own manually because I know quickly identified subjects or ports that I want to look at. There's going to be lots more and other ones that you don't know about yet, but we can always circle back to it. So we start from the highest likelihood of vulnerability and fruit, low-hanging fruit, and start working our way down as we get into the network. So as far as Raspberry Pi goes, PIHack is an image that I put together. You can download it at cyberassassin.com/ARM. It'll work on Raspberry Pi 2 or 3. And here's my Pis. They are built with a Kali image with some custom code in them. And the code is on quick little icons that you can run off the touchscreen, here, here, and here. So we'll talk about the first one. What does it do? It runs Responder. Is anyone familiar with Responder from Spider Labs? Like it? Yes, awesome, wonderful tool. Why are we doing that? Well, it runs off of so many host ports, 53, 80, 445. These are all ports we're going to be needing to utilize why we're doing attacks and why we're attacking within the network, let's just say Metasploit. So it's going to need to bind to those ports. If we are using the running Responder, we're sitting back again waiting because our box is unusable. That's just the whole point of offloading. So the more tasks that we can offload and move off of our main system, it frees us up to continue moving on in the environment and on our attacks that we're looking at. So this one just drops you a quick IP address. Oh, that's it. There's Responder running, sorry. And then we drop a quick IP address. I'm not plugged in network, so I don't have an IP address. Why is that? Because we got to get to those hashes. There's RDP running on this box. It's just, the user is just Pi and Raspberry as the default for Raspberry Pis. So you RDP in, you can start capturing or pulling the hashes off that you've captured, and then feed them into your crack box. You'll have, usually most companies will have like a crack machine or something that you can use. So get those up there, get those running. The point of communicating with the client and saying, hey, where's my Windows environment at, is so that you can begin these processes and get some hashes captured before lunch and actually get your project moving so that they're tracking while you're at lunch or tracking through the night if you haven't gotten any yet. Check it within 30 minutes to an hour, because usually you'll end up having a low privilege user somewhere, and that at least gives you access to start enumerating on the domain and start moving around as a basic user on the network and reading files, joining file shares, using attacks like poisoning the well. So we've gained small access from little devices all over the place. Meanwhile, you have something like Nessus running on another box. You have your deeper Nmap scans running on your main box, and you're freed up to continue on things like Kali or Metasploit. So how do we create a managed workflow with Phase Blaster? I continue to. So at any point within Phase Blaster, when we added our IP addresses, we can just say, run the file straight off aggressive scan. So we'll just run nmap-a basically on those, and then you can parse them back out. We kind of reviewed that, probably got ahead of myself. The Phase Blaster can break this up at any point in time. So you can run -d and just discover. You can run -ff and just, or -f and just run off of the file. But if we did only discover, we can go back at any point in time and run ff, and then it picks up from the discovery file. So it never has to go back and rediscover. That way you can be more free, basically, as a process. So let's look at it actually running. So we ran a -ds, so I said, hey, take everything in my file, find out what's there, and then run an nmap. When it finishes, it dumps out on screen. That's pretty busy there. It's hard to read. All this stuff really gets in the way, the banner grabbing of your line of eyesight, just being effective. Hey, what do I want to look at? You're scrolling through. Even though I only see I see 21's open here, 21, 25, 25 is filtered, 4, 5, 6, 7. And these are just random IPs off the internet. So let's run -parse and see why this actually helps us be more effective. So right here we have an output of the 3 IP addresses that were alive in the scope, and we see just exactly the IP and what's open and nothing else. Everything else is omitted. Again, that's just, hey, look, what can I identify for a service? Are any of these interesting to me? Yes, mostly FTP and FTP down here. So those are what I'm gonna look at. 21. It's recognizing it as FTP, but that should be telnet. Or no, sorry, that says 23. Anyways, the banner said that it was FTP, so maybe it's running on a strange port. All right. One more thing that it does is after it scans all those IP addresses and puts them in a discovered list, it also automatically runs Eyewitness. If you're familiar with Eyewitness, it goes through any web applications or any web services found and takes a screenshot of them. And you can see that here, and it puts them in Power of the Dark Side folder. Again, my Star Wars theme. So this is for you to be able to quickly review. So let's review something from there. All right, so I just ran Firefox report.html from there, and I can get the report. So one of the IP addresses scanned was google.com, so we see google.com. Another thing we can do, and I often do, is just run fet and find something in there. If something seemed interesting based on the name, I just want to see the picture of the screenshot. Reason you're doing this is so that you can quickly identify what might be a site or an application of interest. We don't want to waste our time on this. There's nothing here. There's not an admin panel. It's not an infrastructure item. So those, once we identify them, we can start writing them down, break them out, and run different attacks on those, and ignore the ones that are just a basic web page, because you're not doing an application penetration test on an internal penetration test. So keep in mind of the valuing process of your time. That was pretty much the item. I'll leave some time for talking. I breezed through it fairly quickly. But does anyone have anything that they would like to cover within that? No? Everyone's expert hackers now? Yes.
I wanted to ask, do you ever do any engagements with internal IPv6?
Do I do any engagements with IPv6? You know, it's really up to the client. I have not found any that were running them internally. I've actually never had them give me an IP version 6 scope yet, surprisingly. One thing I have done, if I've run into a WAF, I've converted their IP address to IP version 6 in case they have the ability to interpret IP version 6. And if I can communicate to the web application over IP version 6, then I can bypass their WAF usually.
The purpose of the Raspberry Pi, having a physical extra thing to run responder and get the hashes for?
Yeah, the purpose of running the Raspberry Pi was because when you run responder, it has to bind to ports. And it binds to a lot of very common ports you use for attack or for exfiltration, while reverse call lookups. Also, say 443, 80. A lot of times you will use these ports for reverse shells because they're generally always open and allowed from the machine, so the firewall won't get in the way. So instead of trying to find a port, we'll just pick one that's very commonly used to avoid detection. So I'm freeing up any of those common ports from being binded on my machine so that I can continue working with like Metasploit on different items or different targets within the network. Good question, thank you.
Any other questions?
I probably should just name this slide Q&A. I guess everyone is understanding of being a good red team and delivering effective results now. So thank you for visiting this talk.
Thank you.